Hey friends, Jessica here. Welcome to Rubicons Run Dry. What does it mean to complete an art project? At what point should you consider it finished and put your brush down? Is it ever truly complete? I want to spend a little time with this sorceress from Warhammer Fantasy Battles to keep us company, talking about these topics. If you have any questions about my painting, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll be sure to get round to answering as many as I can. I come from a background of music and digital art, re-entering the mini wargaming hobby some 2 to 3 years ago. I had struggled while younger to dig my teeth into the hobby, and put my Imperial Guard from the time on a shelf, out of sight. I felt like I hit a block, that my skill level wouldn't increase anymore. I was young and didn't have a lot of money to throw at hobbies, so I turned my attention elsewhere. I feel like this is a common experience a lot of young artists have. A lack of money, community, and skill level stunt their enthusiasm before it can truly flourish. Nowadays, I like to think of myself as a jack of a fair few trades and master of none. When it comes to art, I will migrate from one to another and another, slowly building up transferable skills mentally and technically, bringing them over to a new hobby or artistic pursuit. However, once I got back into the mini wargaming hobby and painting miniatures, it kind of stuck with me. I think there's a fair few reasons for that. Namely, having more money as an adult and a drive to do the things I couldn't when I was young and limited by circumstance. I keep all of those minis I painted around. I can't bear to get rid of them. They stand as a reminder of my roots as a kid, annoying the game shop employees every few days on the way home from school by wandering around and not buying anything. In retrospect, I like to think it was at least a little cute, but hey, who knows? My point being, that if I had the money to pursue this hobby as a younger child, I might not have engaged in other things like music and video games nearly as much, and maybe limited myself artistically. The problem we artists face when it comes to creating anything is finding a point in which we can consider the work we're making finished. I'm a proponent of the idea that art is never truly finished. It's always evolving, even after the final layers of paint or varnish are placed down over plastic or canvas. There's always a chance to go back, a chance to change what you've previously done, things you aren't happy with, to continue to create. Every artist will develop their own standards of what they consider finished. Some won't be able to make that decision alone and need checklists and deadlines to keep them on track, and that's all perfectly fine. Everyone's process is slightly different when it comes to engaging with art. When I purchase a new model from my brick and mortar game shop to fill out a list for Warhammer or another tabletop game, I come into contact with a dilemma. Do I finish this model to display standards, or do I finish it to tabletop standards? In a lot of Warhammer communities, including Games Workshop, they'll call this parade standard, or tabletop standard. The answer seems obvious to most people, probably, but not to me. My attention will drift very quickly, and if I choose one of these options, it's very likely the other will be off of the table. I struggle a lot with committing to a project. Like the people that need a checklist or a deadline for their art, I instead have slowly accumulated a series of personal guidelines to refer back to. These are what helped me get back on track with my art. So my first personal guideline is this: the model doesn't have to be finished when it hits the table, it just needs the illusion of being finished. If a blend isn't fully fleshed out, or a shade hasn't been cleaned up but it still sells the effect, I won't finish it just yet. A lot of the time, I will stress out over finishing every aspect of a model, and while this is important, if the hobby is causing you undue stress, it's better to cut your losses and pace yourself. Take your time, come back to it in your own time. We paint miniatures and create art for more than just ourselves. We create to make ideas tangible, to bring an emotion to something we can feel and hold. It doesn't have to be as intense as a Renaissance artist whose whole job is instilling the fear of God into men. The emotion we bring our friends and colleagues in the hobby space is joy and excitement, raw and tangible joy and excitement. When you bring a cool army to the table, or compliment someone's artwork and just spread a little of your own personality and soul into the community, you're reinforcing everybody's self-esteem. Reinforcing your own self-esteem with the community and giving fuel to the flames of passion is important to continue on and achieve a higher level of skill. If it feels like your art has no audience, you'll have less of a drive to complete it. This YouTube channel is my own answer to that. I want to show everyone the limits of my potential as an artist. I want to see everyone else's limits too, and I hope you'll humour me. My second guideline is this: don't skip out on the things that will make others happy, even if they don't necessarily make you happy. That's not to say you should put others before yourself, just to push yourself to do things that aren't super fun if the end result will outweigh it. If you think an idea is cool, try and get it done as early as possible, so you have as much time to work on it as you need. Focal points like faces, hair, and anatomy, it's all important to make a model feel right. In the heart of a battle, those are the things that shine through. I spend a lot of my time in battles taking pictures. I just think it's so very intense and cool. Of course, you don't want to burn yourself out while painting. I will frequently ask myself while painting, is it worth skipping this step I don't enjoy if I know people will notice? And sometimes, to me, yes, it is worth it. Again, there's nothing stopping you from coming back later and doing it when you're in the right headspace to tackle it. I still have a few miniatures that I haven't got plans to bring to the tabletop for a while, waiting for another touch-up. Art is a constant dance between your own perfectionism, your ideals, and what is tangible for you to complete in a reasonable time frame. This is the battle that we as artists across all mediums struggle with. Art is expensive, mentally and economically. Paints cost money, brushes cost money. I still don't own an airbrush because of that. Painting takes a real time that we could be spending with others or engaging with other hobbies. It's all too enticing to put it to the side because you just can't be bothered with it. We have all had a model come to our table and get struck with an overwhelming feeling of dread surrounding the feeling of putting brush to model. It might sit in the pile of shame for months, or perhaps years, without getting any of the love we wanted to give it, for a myriad of reasons. In order to finish a mini, you have to start it, and that won't happen if the starting line keeps getting pushed back further and further. My third guideline then is this: treat every model as a chance to learn, no matter how important it is to you. If you're painting a commemorative model, like Amalia Novena or Tariana Palos, perhaps an expensive miniature like Teclis, or an artistically challenging miniature like a Harlequin or a White Scar, you might get worried and afraid of taking the dip, of crossing the Rubicon and actually starting the painting process. You will never be able to create a Harlequin's checker pattern if you never paint a Harlequin. You can't figure out how to create a crisp white armor panel if you never start your White Scar. I'm still even now guilty of this, with my centerpiece model Teclis sitting unpainted on a shelf. If you feel like you might fail and ruin a model, that's fine. Then fail. All mistakes are reversible to an extent. Traditional mediums of art get a bad reputation for being irreversible, and some parts of them are. You can't take an eraser to a bad blend, but you can repaint the base coat underneath. Try again. It takes far more coats of thinned out paint to create a visible texture than you might think. No, thinned paints. 2 layers is usually enough to bring out full opacity. Thin your paints, fail, then try again. It's a part of the process, and we all have to get comfortable with failure in order to succeed. To quote an absolute legend, they are not mistakes, they are happy accidents. Sometimes you might even like a sloppy dry brush or a non-oil stain. Don't be afraid to get creative, even if it goes against what is theoretically the limit of a model. Sometimes you need to paint a miniature with feeling rather than textbook skill. I have a few models from Blackstone Fortress I've painted completely ignoring the obvious shapes of the model, ignoring lighting and shading entirely. I was, at the time, in a place of pretty strong negative emotion, and I wanted to put that on the model to try and get it out of me. Let the model tell you what it wants sometimes. Painting a miniature, unlike a lot of other art forms, is a conversation between the model itself and the artist expressing themselves on it, less like a paint-by-numbers book, and more like an elaborate game of artistic telephone. A vision was implanted into the model that the sculptor wanted you to perceive, and then it's your job as a miniature painter to express yourself using it, push yourself. Lastly, a piece of wisdom given to me as criticism for the first draft of this video. Never tell someone you're starting a project until you're really sure you can finish it. Part of the joy of finishing a project is showing someone. You don't want to dip into the font too soon, or else you might lose steam, and never finish it. In this hobby, there's no win or lose condition. There's no failure and no success. Just a miniature that you've put your touch on, and hopefully, a miniature you can be proud of. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. If you've enjoyed yourself, feel free to like and subscribe, and perhaps tell a friend that needs to finish a miniature to cross the Rubicon and watch this video. I'll see you next time. Stay safe. Thank you.